Hi everyone, my name is Stephen Tickner and I'm the pastor of Central Christian Church. Thank you for joining us for this series called Encountering Scripture. It's a series that is designed to help you create a more personal and intimate relationship with the scripture reading for the upcoming Sunday. And for this exercise, we're going to be doing 3 readings of the text. The first reading will be simply listening and responding. The second reading will be where we dive a little bit deeper into the scripture itself. And the third reading will be one where we use our imaginations and let our imaginations guide us. And we'll close the session out with some applications that will help you extend the study throughout this week. And so I hope that this will help you create your own personal understanding with this upcoming scripture. I would advise you to have a piece of paper and a pen nearby so that you can take notes. And once you have those ready, then let's get started. For our first reading of the scripture, I invite you to simply listen. You can follow along on screen, but listen to the scripture and just take in what you do. Just listen and respond. So here's the first reading of Matthew, chapter 22, verses 15 through 22. Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere, and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." Then he said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. I invite you now to think of the words and phrases that stuck out for you in this first reading of the text. What was it that jumped out and captured a piece of your memory, your mind, your imagination? What words or phrases stuck out for you? And I invite you to write them down on your notebook or simply pause this video and take some time to meditate on those words or those phrases. For the second reading of Scripture, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some of the context of the Scripture and some of the words and people involved in the text. So I invite you to join me in the second reading of the Scripture. Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality." So here we have set up the characters in this story. On the one end, we have the Pharisees, who Matthew says are trying to entrap Jesus. But it's not just the Pharisees. And notice the Pharisees have their own disciples. They send their disciples to Jesus. And they send them along with the Herodians. Now, generally speaking, the Herodians are people who are following Herod, the Jewish king. And they work with Rome in order to coexist. So you have the Herodians who are pro-Rome generally, and you have the Pharisees who are in charge of keeping the law and traditions. And so these are two very different groups who have come together to oppose Jesus, to entrap Jesus. And so I think one question that leads here is, what is it about Jesus that brings these two very different groups together in opposition to him? Matthew continues, "Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" Matthew is reminding us here that Jerusalem in Israel is a colony, has been colonized by Roman forces, by Rome. And so they are ruled over by the emperor. And this gets back to the Herodians. The emperor rules over Jerusalem, and the Herodians are in charge of keeping order, of working with Rome so that they can coexist. And so the Romans, as a colony, they require all of their colonies to pay a tax back to Rome. And so this is what they're trying to entrap Jesus with, whether it's legal or not to pay the tax back to Rome. And then Matthew says, "But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, 'Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax.' And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." Then he said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. So Jesus here is answering their entrapment, answering their question in a way that doesn't put him vulnerable to their quest to entrap him. He's answering in a way that can appease either side. And so what he says is interesting. He asks them for a coin, and he says, "Look at this coin." Now, they had to pay the tax with the denarius, and the denarius was a Roman coin, and on it had the image of Caesar. It was one with the Caesar. It says, "Whose image and whose title?" And so there'll be the picture of Caesar's head, and then there'll be his title, which gives him a divine title. So it'd be like Son of the Divine, Son of God. The emperor took on a divine character, much like Jesus did himself. So that's why a lot of the times we see Jesus's titles being the titles that Caesar had, and they're all about being the Son of God. There's kind of this narrative that Jesus is the anti-Caesar. Jesus is the true Son of God. And so you see Jesus asking them to bring him a coin, which has Caesar's image on it, which has his divine title. And Jesus says, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's." And so the question arises, what is God's and what is Caesar's? What's the dividing line? And we'll talk about that a little bit more in our applications. And so we see Jesus get out of this entrapment through his answer. And it says, Matthew writes that when they heard his answer, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. So I invite you now to take some notes about things that stuck out for you as we've read through a little bit more closely this scripture for a second time, and so that you'll have a list of things that stick out for you as you go through these scripture readings. And now for this third reading of the scripture, I invite you to use your imagination. Really give way to your critical mind, your thinking mind, and I invite you to use your imagination. Really see yourself in this story. Now imagine that you can imagine you're one of the characters. You can imagine that you are looking at this scene play out. You can imagine that maybe you're part of the scene, but you're not one of the main characters. So really take a vantage point from your imaginative point of view and really listen to the story and really see the story in your mind. If it takes you somewhere completely different, like you think you're in the temple, but you're actually somewhere in a modern location, that's fine. Allow your imagination to take you there. Let your imagination really flow with the story as I read it. So you can close your eyes and listen. You can continue to read the words on the screen. However you need to engage your imagination, I invite you to do so now. Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." Then he said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. I invite you to record some of the things that came up for you as you let your imagination take control of this reading of this scripture. Now that we've gone through 3 readings of the scripture, I invite you to hear these application points, application questions, so that you can then continue this study throughout the week and as we approach Sunday. So for my first application, I invite you to read through the scripture slowly. Take time to contemplate words or phrases that resonate to you. So similar to what we did with that first reading, continue to read the scripture daily if you can, every other day if it's possible, just as much as you can. Read through the scripture and allow words and phrases that resonate with you, to allow yourself to meditate on those words and phrases and to see where they take you. The second application point is to research in more depth the Pharisees, Herodians, and the Roman Empire. Who are they? What is their social role? How much power do they hold? Do some research on Google. You can go to different resources that are online, and you can really read about who the Herodians were in more depth, who the Pharisees were in more depth, the impact of the Roman colonization on the area. Just get as deep as you want and allow yourself to learn about these different factions, and it might allow you to go deeper with your understanding of what's going on in the scripture. And it might even give you a deeper understanding of the scripture as a whole, one that you might surprise yourself. So do some research. I invite you to do some research and think more about who is in this scripture reading. Who are the characters in this scripture reading? Finally, for our third application point, I go back to the question that I posed a little bit earlier. Jesus says, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." Where is the dividing line? Is there one? How do we know what belongs to who? So back to this question of what belongs to Caesar and what belongs to God. Is there a difference? If there is, what is that difference? And what makes that difference? And really think about what that dividing line is. What is Jesus trying to say in this line? Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's and what is God unto God's. There's some real life implications to this. You'll find it in modern social conversations about what our responsibility is to pay taxes versus what our responsibility is to not pay taxes that go towards things that we don't agree with or that might go against our faith. Really put some thought into what is Caesar's and what is God's. And so we've read through the scripture 3 times. We've given the application points. I really invite you to go as deep as you can on the scripture so that you come up for yourself an understanding of this scripture. You develop a personal and intimate understanding of this scripture. I wish you good luck, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday.